For 53 years, I was a librarian who could find any book in the world for anybody who walked in and asked, except the one record I needed most, which was my own daughter, whose card my family quietly pulled from the catalog of my life when I was 17 and ordered me never to go looking for again. I am going to tell you about the morning I stood at the arrivals gate of a small airport and waited for a gray-haired stranger with my mother's eyes to walk through it. But first, I have to tell you what it costs to keep your own child a secret for more than half a century. My name is Lois. I am 70 years old, and I spent 46 years as the librarian of our small town in Minnesota, the lake town where the winters close in white and everybody's grandmother is buried in the same churchyard. I gave my whole working life to keeping a record, to making sure that this town never lost track of its own story. Every birth in the newspaper archive, every name in the old census rolls, every book findable by anyone who came looking. I was the keeper of the catalog. And the bitter joke I carried to work every single day for 46 years is that I, who could locate any record for any stranger, had spent my life with one card removed from my own drawer, one book taken off my own shelf and hidden, by people who told me it was for my own good, when I was too young to know that a thing can be hidden and still be real, still be out there in the world, still be mine. That library was my whole life, and I gave it everything I was not allowed to give the daughter I lost. 46 years at the same oak desk, and I knew where every book in that building lived, the way you know the rooms of your own house in the dark. I taught 2 generations of this town to read. I sat with lonely widowers who came in just to have one person say their name out loud, and with frightened teenagers looking up things they could not ask their own mothers. And I never once made a single one of them feel ashamed of what they had come looking for, because I knew, far better than they could have guessed, what it is to be ashamed of a thing you cannot help. The town thought of me as the woman who had no family, the spinster librarian who poured herself into her work. They had it exactly backwards. I poured myself into that work because I did have a family, one daughter, and I was not permitted to pour myself into her. And a heart that full has to go somewhere, or it will drown you. So I gave it to the town, and every record I lovingly kept for somebody else was a quiet apology to the one record I had let them take. If you have ever been made to bury a grief alive, to carry a loss you were not even permitted to name, to smile at Thanksgiving over a hole in your own heart that everyone at the table had agreed to pretend was not there, then I think you already know the particular silence I am about to break. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and whether there is a thing in your life you were ordered, long ago, to never speak of again. I read every one. There are more of us than you would ever guess. A whole silent country of us, carrying the unspeakable thing alone. Let me take you back, because you cannot understand the woman at the airport without the girl in 1973. I was 17, and I was in love the way you can only be at 17, with a boy named Jimmy who made me laugh and who shipped out and did not come home from a war that took a lot of boys from towns like ours. And before he left, I got pregnant. I want to tell you about that girl with tenderness, because nobody else ever did. She was not bad. She was not loose, the word they used. She was a frightened, grieving 17-year-old who had loved a boy who died and who was carrying the only piece of him left in the world. And in those years, in a town like mine, in a family like mine, that was not a tragedy to be held. It was a shame to be disappeared. I should tell you about Jimmy, because he has been gone a very long time, and there is no one left but me to remember him kindly. He was not a careless boy, and I was not a careless girl. He was tall and freckled, and he worked at the filling station, and he was going to marry me. He said it plain. He gave me a ring his grandmother had left him, a little thing with a chip of a stone in it. And then his number came up, and he went off the way the boys did then, promising to write, and he did write, for a while. And then the letters stopped, and a different kind of letter came to his mother's house instead. I was already carrying his child when the news came, so I was grieving the boy and growing the baby at the very same time, 16 turning 17, and there was not one person on this earth I was allowed to grieve to, because we had never gotten to be public, and a girl in my situation did not get to stand anywhere near the front of anybody's mourning. I grieved Jimmy in secret, the same way I would soon be made to grieve his daughter. I have had a great deal of practice in this long life at loving people I was not permitted to be seen loving. My father was a deacon and a hard man, and the family's good name was the realest thing in his world, realer than his own daughter. There was no discussion, no choosing. The morning it could no longer be hidden under a loose coat, I was driven, in silence, 4 hours south to a place they called a maternity home, which was a tall, sad house full of girls exactly like me, all of us with our shame and our growing bellies and our cover stories. All of us told that the kindest, most loving thing we could do, the only decent thing, was to give the baby to people who deserved one, to a real family, and then to come home and forget it ever happened and get on with our lives as though we were clean. I was there 4 months, and at the end of it, I had a daughter. I think about that house still, the home they sent us to. There were a dozen of us there at a time, girls from good families all over the state, sent away under cover stories, a sick aunt who needed nursing, a special school, a long visit with relatives somewhere far. We were not even allowed to use our real last names with one another, as though our very friendships had to be deniable. We were fed, and we were kept, and we were lectured, gently and constantly, about the loving sacrifice we were each about to make, how the truest kind of mother love was to hand our babies to married couples who could give them everything we never could. They were very good at it, the people who ran those places. They knew exactly how to take a frightened girl's deepest love for her own child and turn that love into the very lever that would pry the child out of her arms. They told us that wanting to keep our babies was selfish. They told us that letting them go was love. And we believed them. Because we were children. And because every single adult in our lives was singing the same song. And because there was no other song anywhere that we were allowed to hear. I held her for 1 hour. They were not going to let me hold her at all, but a nurse with kind eyes broke the rule, and for 1 hour, in a back room, I held my daughter and I memorized her. The weight of her, the dark hair, the way her whole hand closed around one of my fingers, and I told her, fast, everything I would never get to tell her, that her daddy was a good boy who would have loved her, that I was so sorry, that I would think about her every single day of my life, which was the one promise I have never once broken. And then a woman came and took her out of my arms, and I signed the papers they put in front of me because a 17-year-old does what the grown-ups in the room tell her she must. And that was the last I saw of my own child for 53 years. Now here is the part that did the deepest damage, deeper even than the losing. And I need you to hear it because it is the part nobody talks about. I came home, and my family had decided completely that the way to handle it was that it had simply never happened. There was no funeral for my grief, because you cannot bury a thing you are forbidden to admit died. I was expected to walk back into my old high school and finish my senior year and smile, with a 4-month hole blown through the center of me and a daughter out there somewhere in the world, and to never, ever speak of it. My mother never mentioned it again, not once, until the day she died. My father acted as though I had been away at a long visit with relatives, and the message, delivered not in words but in the total, suffocating silence of that house, was unmistakable. Your grief is shameful. Your loss is not real. You will carry this alone, forever, and you will carry it quietly, or you will shame this family. I was 17, and they handed me a secret the size of a human being and told me to swallow it and keep swallowing it for the rest of my life. I want to give you just one example of what that silence does to a person. Stretched across a whole life. When I was in my 30s, a cousin had a baby, and there was a shower, and I sat in that circle of cooing women and helped coo over the bassinet and folded the tiny clothes and smiled until my face ached, with a secret screaming inside me that I too had held a baby once, that I was a mother too, that I had folded one tiny gown in a back room and then watched it carried away. And not one soul in that bright room would ever know it, because to say it would be to commit the one unforgivable sin in my family, which was to let the shame be seen. And years later, when my father lay dying, the deacon, the hard man, I sat by his bed and thought, surely now, surely at the very end, a man wants to set things right. And he looked at me, clear-eyed and lucid, and he never said her name, never said he was sorry, never once acknowledged that there was a granddaughter of his somewhere out in the world. He just patted my hand and told me I had always been a good girl, even dying. The only thing that mattered to that man was that I had stayed quiet. And I did for 53 years. I want you to understand the weight of that, the daily weight. I married, eventually, a decent man, and I never told him, because by then the silence had grown over the wound like bark over a wire, and I did not know how to find the words after so long. I had no other children, and I let everyone assume that was just how it went for me, and I let them feel a little sorry for the librarian who never had a family, while I carried, in absolute solitude, the knowledge that I was a mother, that there was a woman out there with my blood and Jimmy's smile, who had a birthday every year that I marked alone, in my car, in the library parking lot, where no one would see me cry. 53 birthdays I sat in that parking lot. I baked no cake. I said her name, the name I had given her in that back room that nobody else on earth knew, and then I dried my face and went inside and helped someone find a book about gardening. That was my life. The keeper of everyone's records, keeping the one that was hers in a place so deep and so locked that some years I almost convinced myself I had made her up. The name I gave her, in that back room, in that 1 hour, was Grace. Nobody else on this earth knew it. Not my husband, not Wayne, not Judith. For 53 years, it was a word I said only to myself, in the car, on her birthday, the most secret word in my whole vocabulary. Some years I would drive out to the lake on that day and sit and watch the gray water and say it just once, out loud, Grace, only to hear it exist in the air for a moment, and then I would dry my face and drive home. I had given a piece of my own child a name, and I had to keep even the name a secret. And if you ever want to understand exactly what shame does to a human being, there it is, in one plain fact. A mother who was not allowed to say her own daughter's name out loud, not once, to a single living soul, for 53 years. I want you to sit for a moment with how lonely that is, and then I want you to hold on to the fact that it ends, because mine did. And that ending is the whole reason I am sitting here telling you this today. My sister Judith is the one who kept the gate on all of it. And I have to tell you about her, because the easy version of this is a story about the cruel 1970s, and the true version has a person in it, alive today, who chose the silence over and over long after the 70s were gone. Judith is 4 years older than me, and she was raised the way oldest daughters in families like ours were raised, to be the guardian of the family's respectability, and she took to it like a calling. Judith was at the kitchen table the day they decided to send me away, and she nodded. And in all the decades since, every single time the subject so much as flickered near the surface, It was Judith who pressed it back down. Judith who would catch my eye at a family gathering and give the small, hard shake of the head that meant don't. Judith who, when our mother lay dying and I thought, maybe now, maybe at the end we can finally just say it out loud, took me by the arm in the hospital hallway and said, low and fierce, "Don't you dare upset her with that now. Let it lie. It's the past." It's the past, as though my daughter were a regrettable incident and not a living woman somewhere in the world. For 53 years, Judith was the warden of my silence, and she believed, I think she truly believed, that she was protecting all of us. She was protecting a good name. She just never once counted what the good name cost. I have thought hard about Judith over these last 2 years, and I have landed somewhere that surprised me, which is something close to pity. Because Judith was a casualty of that house too, in her own way. She was handed a job at birth, guardian of the family name, and she did it so completely that she never got to grow a self underneath the role. She could not afford to believe that what was done to me was wrong, because if it was wrong, then she had spent her entire life enforcing a wrong. And that was a thing my sister simply could not survive looking at. So she kept the gate, not out of plain cruelty, but out of a deep terror of what waited on the other side of admitting the truth. Respectability works like that. It will let you sacrifice the realest things in your life, a sister, a niece, your own peace of mind, all to protect a reputation, and it will call that sacrifice a virtue, right up until the day somebody finally refuses to keep making it. And then, all at once, everyone can see the thing for what it always was, a cage. The prisoners had been kept busy polishing. There was a moment, 2 years ago, when I had all but decided to take the whole thing to my grave, the way Judith wanted, the way I had been trained. My husband had passed, I was getting old, and I told myself the kindest thing now, the decent thing, was to leave my daughter undisturbed in whatever life she had. Because what right did I have, the woman who signed her away, to come knocking on her door 53 years later and crack open her world? Judith had said exactly that to me once, in those words. You gave up the right to be her mother when you signed. And God help me, I had believed her. I believed that giving birth to a child and grieving her every day for 53 years had somehow left me with less claim to her than a stranger, because that is what the shame does. It convinces you that the love itself was the crime. It took me most of my life to untangle that lie, and I want to hand you the untangling, in case you are caught in the very same knot. They told me I had given up the right to her, but I did not give her up. A 17-year-old, alone, grieving a dead boy, with every adult she trusted telling her it was the only way, was made to give her up. And there is a whole universe of difference between those two sentences, and the entire weight of my shame had been living in the gap between them. I had spent 53 years believing I had done a shameful thing, when the truth it took me until 70 years old to say out loud and plain, is that a shameful thing was done to me. The shame was never mine. It belonged to a father who valued his name over his own grandchild, to a time that punished frightened girls and shielded respectable families, to a whole machine that ran on convincing children that their love was a sin. I had been hauling luggage that was never mine to carry for over half a century, because they had handed it to me when I was far too young to say, "This is not mine, I will not take it." And the day I finally set that luggage down on the ground was the day I went looking for my grace. What changed everything was my brother Wayne. I have not told you about Wayne yet, and I saved him for here, because Wayne is the reason there is a happy ending to tell. Wayne is my younger brother, 2 years behind me, and back then he was a 15-year-old boy, powerless, the only person in that whole cold house who ever once let me know that he saw me. He could not stop them. But the day they drove me away, Wayne slipped a note into my coat pocket that I did not find until I was 4 hours south, and it said, in a 15-year-old's handwriting, "I love you, Lo. This isn't right. I'm sorry." I kept that note for 53 years. It was, for a long time, the only evidence I had that I was not crazy, that what was being done to me was in fact a wrong and not a kindness, that one other human being in my family had looked at it and called it by its true name. Wayne and I had been the soft ones together in that hard house, the two who felt things too much. And we had survived our whole childhood by being each other's witness. When we were small and our father's moods filled the house like bad weather, Wayne and I would meet in the upstairs hall closet with a flashlight and a stolen cookie and just sit there, not even talking. Two children keeping each other company in the dark. That note in my coat pocket was Wayne reaching into the closet one more time, telling me he was still there in the dark with me, even after they had driven me 4 hours away from everyone I had ever known. I unfolded that note so many thousands of times over the years that it went soft as cloth along the creases. When I doubted my own memory, when the family silence had me half believing I had imagined the entire thing, I would take out Wayne's note and read that 15-year-old handwriting. This isn't right. And I would know, again, that I was not crazy. One single person willing to say, "This isn't right," can keep your sanity alive across 50 years. Be that person for somebody if you are ever given the chance. You have no idea what your one note slipped into a coat pocket might be holding together on the other end. And Wayne never forgot her either. That is the thing I learned 2 years ago when Wayne came to my house after my husband's funeral and sat at my kitchen table and said, "Lo, I think about her too, your girl. I've thought about her my whole life, and I've watched you carry this alone for 50 years because they made you, and I can't stand to watch you carry it into the ground. They're gone now. Mama's gone. Daddy's gone. The only person still guarding this thing is Judith, and Judith doesn't get a vote on your own child." And then my baby brother, 68 years old, reached across the table and took my hand and said the words that finally cracked 53 years of bark off the wire. He said, "You're allowed, Lois. You were always allowed. Let's go find her." I did not do it in defiance, and I want to be clear about that, because it was not about Judith or my dead father or winning anything. It was the quietest, most enormous decision of my life. I, the keeper of records, was finally going to look for the one record I had spent my life forbidden to seek. Wayne helped me. We registered with the reunion registries, the ones that exist now, where a relinquished child and a birth mother can each leave a card in the drawer and hope the other one comes looking. I gave my information to a system designed for exactly the thing my family had sworn could never be spoken. And the act of typing my daughter's birth date into that form, after 53 years of saying it only to the windshield of my car, broke something open in me that I cannot fully describe. It was the first time in over half a century that I had told the truth about my own life, out loud, to the world, on the record. The librarian put her own card back in the drawer. Those days of waiting for the registry to do its quiet work were the longest of my life, longer than the 4 months in the home, because hope, it turns out, is a far heavier thing to carry than grief. Grief you can set down in a corner of yourself and slowly learn to live around. Hope makes you check the mailbox 6 times a day. Wayne stayed close by, and we did not talk much about what we would do if the answer came back that she did not want to be found, or worse, that she was no longer living, because that was the fear underneath all the other fears, that I had waited too long, that the silence had won simply by outlasting her. I had spent 53 years refusing to let myself fully hope, because hope, in my situation, had always felt like a thing that would tear me clean apart. And there I was at 70, finally letting it all the way in, knowing it could destroy me, and doing it anyway. Because Wayne had been right. I could not carry her into the ground unspoken. Whatever the answer turned out to be, I was at last going to have reached, after a whole lifetime of obeying, the reaching itself was the victory, before I ever knew whether anyone would reach back. And here is the thing about a card in a drawer, the thing I had forgotten in all my years of grief. A record only works if both people are looking. I had spent 53 years believing I was alone, in the dark, reaching for her. I was not alone. She had been reaching back the entire time. My daughter, who her adoptive family had named Kathy, and who had grown up loved, I am grateful to say, by good people, had known her whole life that she was adopted, and had been quietly searching for her birth mother for over 20 years, leaving her own card in every drawer she could find, wondering if the woman who gave her up had ever thought of her even once. She did not know that the woman who gave her up had thought of her every single day. She did not know about the back room, or the hour, or the name, or the 53 birthdays in the parking lot. She had grown up with the other story, the one the agencies told, that her mother had been a girl who could not keep her and moved on. She did not know I had never moved on for one single day. Our two cards had been sitting in adjacent drawers for years, fingertips apart. And all it took, in the end, was for me to stop obeying a silence that 2 dead parents and 1 frightened sister had wrapped around my whole life. The moment I reached, she was already there. The match came back in 11 days. 11 days after 53 years. I will never forget Wayne calling me, his old voice shaking, telling me they had found her, that she was alive, that she was well, that she lived in Oregon and had 2 grown children of her own, which meant that somewhere out west there were grandchildren with Jimmy's smile, and that she had written in her registry file, in the box that asked why she was searching, 4 words: I want my mother. She flew in to meet me on a Tuesday in October. I stood at the arrivals gate of our little regional airport, an old woman with a younger brother's hand gripping mine, watching the passengers come through. And I did not know how I would recognize her. And then I did, instantly, the way you know your own face, because she came through that gate and she had my mother's eyes and Jimmy's smile, 53 years old and looking around that little airport with a terror and a hope that I knew because it was my own. And she saw me. And neither of us moved for a second. This woman and I, who had been 1 hour and then 53 years apart. And then she said one word. She said, "Mom?" Like a question, like she could not believe she was allowed to ask it. And 53 years of silence, of parking lots, of swallowed grief, of being told my love was ashamed to be hidden, all of it broke at once. And I opened my arms in the middle of that airport, the way I had not been allowed to keep them open in that back room. And my daughter walked into them. And I held her for the second time in my life. And this time, nobody on this earth was ever going to come and take her back out of them. We have a great deal to make up for, Kathy and I, and not nearly enough years left to make all of it up in, and we both know it. And so we do not waste the days we have been given. She calls me Mom, still a little carefully, like a word she is testing the weight of. And every single time she says it, something in me that had been clenched shut for 53 years lets go a little more. I have met her children, my grandchildren, grown now, with children of their own beginning to come. And one of them, her son, has Jimmy's freckles and Jimmy's easy laugh. And the first time I saw him, I had to sit down, because there was the boy I lost in the war, looking back out at me from a face that exists in this world only because I was finally brave enough to look. I am learning all of them, late, hungrily, greedily. I am learning to be a mother and a grandmother at 70, decades after they swore to me I had signed that right away forever. And I will tell you what I did not believe and now know in my bones. It is not too late. A heart can open again after 53 years of being held shut. It is rusty, and it is slow, and it weeps when it first begins to move, but it opens. Mine did. Now I will tell you the cold truth about Judith, because there is one, though it is a sorrowful cold. When it was done, when the reunion had happened, Judith was furious. She called me, not to share my joy, but to grieve the family's exposed secret, to ask how I could do this to Mama's memory, to say I had humiliated all of us. And I listened to my older sister, the warden of 53 years of my silence, and for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of her, because I had my daughter now, and a woman who has her daughter back is not afraid of anybody. And I said, gently, because I did not need to be cruel, I had won the only thing I ever wanted. Judith, you spent 50 years protecting a good name. I have spent 11 days being called Mom. I know now which one of us chose the better thing. And I hung up. Judith protected the family reputation her entire life, and in the end, the reputation was all she got to keep, while the rest of us, Wayne and Kathy's children and me, we got each other. She guarded an empty house so well and so long that she is the only one still standing in it. That is what the silence cost, and she is the one, at last, who has to pay it, alone, with her good name, in the quiet she fought so hard to keep. I spent my life as a librarian, so let me leave you with the truest thing the catalog ever taught me. You can take a book off the shelf, you can pull its card from the drawer, you can strike it from the record, you can tell everyone it was never there, but you cannot make it stop existing. It is out there in the world, real, whole, waiting, and the only thing your hiding accomplishes is to make sure that the two people who are reaching for each other cannot find the way. If your family has ordered you to bury something alive, a child, a love, a loss, a truth, a whole part of who you are, and you have been carrying it in the dark for years because they told you that you had no right to it. I am 70 years old, and I am here to tell you what it took me 53 years to learn. You are allowed. You were always allowed. The shame was never yours to carry. They just handed it to you when you were too young to refuse it. And you can set it down now, today, at any age, and go looking for what was taken from you. Put your card back in the drawer. Reach. You may find, as I did, that the one you have been grieving alone in the dark has been standing on the other side of a silence the whole time. Fingertips from yours, waiting for you to stop being afraid and simply say their name out loud.